I guess being somebody that survived it, came through it, like you mentioned, you came out in your right state of mind, things of the nature, and there could have been so many bad paths you're going down to. What advice would you say to somebody that's listening to kind of keep them from either walking that same path or getting out of it if they're already in it?
Ooh, if you're in an abusive relationship, get out. Um, because I was a homeless teen, that made me subjected to tolerate a lot of it because I had nowhere else to go. And I had my own family, that I grew up with, but the majority of my family on my mother's side was in and still is in Baltimore. And I didn't have any contact numbers. I didn't have any contact information because if I would have called one of them, if I'd have had a phone number or anything like that, they would have definitely took me. I wouldn't have had to gone through that. So what I did was when I got pregnant, I filled out an application for New York City housing. And I was on a waiting list for an apartment, which was my first apartment. I was on a waiting list for 2 years and 6 months. So for those 2 years, outside of the years that I was actually with my son's father for about 5 7 years, but for the last 2 years and 6 months of that relationship, I had to continue to endure the abuse because I was waiting on the apartment. I
Mm-hmm.
had nowhere else to go. And I just endured it. I just tolerated it. And then when they called me for the apartment, I had nothing. It was empty. It was Ravenswood houses in Long Island City, Queens. And I just fell on my knees and I just thanked God. And I used to be a really bad asthmatic. And it seemed like once I got my apartment, the asthma left. I never had another asthma attack after that. So I know stress has a lot to do with asthma, on
No.
top of some other things that's going on in the hood, like roaches and rats and mice and stuff like that. All of that um, contributes to asthma. But after that, I didn't have an asthma attack anymore. And I just fell on my knees and I just cried out to God and I just thanked him because I finally had a place. I finally had my own place. I didn't have to sleep in staircases and stairwells and you know like friends would sneak me in their house and hide me in their closet, and then if their mama knew I was in there, they'll be like, oh no, she can't stay here. So I was subjected to a lot, and like I said, if it were not for God's grace, I probably would be a mess. I could have been in jail. It's so many things I could have been, but like I said, God had a whole nother plan for me. And when I got my record deal with Luke, and like I said, that was my first time on the plane, and first time like seeing palm trees, and Luke never knew what I went through because I never talked about it. I kept it a secret. I think he knew I had some issues, because I just sometimes I would just be quiet and he'd be like, "You all right?" And I used to be, I would just shake my head, yeah. So I hid a lot of that from the record company, and I just wrapped myself up in the music. I just wrapped myself up in the music. And for a long time I was ashamed of my story, because it happened to me as a child. Like I said, I was sold into prostitution when I was 15 years old. So my life was taken from me. And the interesting thing is all the girls were much older than me. They were older than me, and they kind of protected me because they knew I was a baby. So what they would do is they would go out there and they would make the money, and then they would sneak and give me the money. So I wouldn't have to sleep with the men. They would sleep with the men for me and then give me the money. So the pimp went in with my ass. And one day they all just got together and they begged him. They was like, she's a baby, just let her go, let her go back home, let her go back home. And they finally broke into his mind. I guess, I don't know, maybe the Holy Spirit moved in him, and him and the girls, they drove me back home and they dropped me off, and he gave me $500, and he was like, I don't ever want to see you on the street again. But what I did was, I never told anybody that I was being abused at home. That's how I winded up on the street. So it was like, I would run out of the house from the abuse at home, and then I would be on the street and then get abused all over again. So I went through a lot of abuse, and my advice would be, don't let go of God. Like I said, I let go. I let go for a little bit, but he never let go of me. God is real. And like I said, by his grace, whoever's going through anything, don't let go of God. If you believe, if you don't believe, seek him. Seek Jesus. Seek him. He's real. And that's the reason why I'm sitting here today. That's the only reason why. Because my life was spared. My life was spared. And I just that's just it. Like, I'm here to talk to young ladies,
Mm-hmm.
about that. If you're in an abusive relationship with a man, get out. Get out. Get out, because a lot of women winded up dead, And again, like I said, by the grace of God, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here to say, get out. If your mother, well, things is different now. Things are different because the system is different. Children get removed from the home real quick. It don't even have to be no physical abuse going on, and they're like, you ain't go to school in a week. We taking that kid out the house. I remember one time I called the cops on my mother, and the cops showed up, and she cursed them out, and they left me, because that's how it was back then. That's how it was back then, and because I would run away, and then I knew that I would have to go back home. So I used to be terrified just to ring the bell, because I knew if I rang the bell and she let me back in, the abuse would start all over again. And then that one time when I called the cops, what she did was, when they left, she went out and she bought a lock. They had these locks back then where you can lock the door from the inside with a key. And then when you take the key out, you can't get out the door. So one day she came to beat me, and she was trying to shove me out the window, and I went to run, and I went to try to get out the door, and I couldn't, because she took that key out, so I couldn't get out. And it was horrible. It was horrible. And my mother is no longer here. And in the end, when she was in the hospital, and she was dying, and I was there for her. I was there. And while she was on her deathbed, I told her that I forgave her. I told her that I loved her, because I wanted my mother to transition into the light. I wanted her to make it to heaven. I knew she knew God, but something went wrong. Satan stepped in. The devil stepped in, and
Mm-hmm.
I understand why, but I think that's a whole nother conversation. My mother was delving into the black arts, she was mixing Christianity with
Witchcraft.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She, and God said you can only serve but one. So I think she opened up a door that she couldn't close. And I believe that's what the problem was with my mother and the abuse of her girls. But yeah, yeah. And I never, this is my first time really talking about this the way that I am, publicly, on a public platform.
I appreciate your honesty and your transparency and everything. You mentioned you mentioned there was a frustration and everything, which I think we've all had for one reason or another. Just whatever God's got for me, I don't want it. I'm like this is just too much. And then now totally different person. Like we're gonna play your change record as well, but now you're back and everything. What was the bridge that brought you back to salvation?
When I got that apartment, when I finally had a place, when I finally had a home, and I just dropped to my knees. The foundation was always there because growing up we was in church, like the foundation was it was not always abuse, there
Hmm.
was good days. And it seemed like once we got a certain age, then the abuse kicked in. So I don't know if it was like they too little right now. When they get preteen, maybe they can handle these ass whippings,
Right.
Like it didn't happen. Like when I was a little girl, I saw it happening to my older sister, and then she ran away. And then when she ran away, it was me and my other sister, and I saw it happening to her, and then she ran away. So that's how I learned how to run away from home from my sisters, because I saw them run away. I remember them getting beat when I was a little girl. It wasn't happening to me, but I saw it happen to them. And I never thought I would be next in line, but sure enough, I was next in line. And when I turned 16 on my 16th birthday, she took me, she was like, get dressed. So I got dressed. I thought that maybe we was going to go to a movie or something, that she was going to do something for my birthday. And we got on the bus and we went downtown Brooklyn, and we started walking toward the courthouses. And I knew about the courthouses from my sister before me, who she had put in a group home. And I see family court, and I'm like, okay, like I'm still confused. And we're sitting in this courthouse, and um, they called her name. We go in the judge's chambers, and he said, "So what brings you here today?" He's talking to my mother,
Hmm.
and my mother said, "I don't want her on my birthday." And the judge was like, "Excuse me?" And she was like, "I don't want her." And he was like, so he looked at me, he looked at the paperwork, and he was like, "Oh, young lady, I see today is your birthday. Happy birthday." And I told him thank you. And he was like, "Well," he said, "as of today, your daughter is 16. She's out of the jurisdiction of family court. At the age of 16, she will have to be under the jurisdiction of criminal court, and your daughter has not committed a crime. So what do you want us to do?" And I was removed from the court, from the judge's chambers, and my mother spoke to him, and I was sitting in this room, and she never came back. And I sat there for hours. I was looking at this clock. It got dark outside. She never came back. And these people came, and they told me, "Come on, let's go." And I got in this van, and they took me to a group home. And that's how I wound up in group homes. And while in the group home, I never told them I was abused, because I was conditioned. I was conditioned to her telling me that it was my fault, that I literally thought it was my fault and I deserved the abuse. So therefore I didn't talk about it, because I didn't think anything was wrong.
Hmm.
Outside of that one time when I called the police out of fear. But yeah, so I was in this group home for like a couple of months, and they called me in the office. The counselor called me in the office, and I loved it there. I didn't want to go back home. I thought I could stay there forever. And they called me in the office, and they said, "You're not like the rest of the kids." I was like, "What do you mean?" They was like, "There's nothing wrong with you. We don't see you with any issues or anything. You can go back home. We're going to send you back home." And I was like, "I don't want to go back home." And they was like, "But you don't belong here. Like, these kids here have issues. You don't have any issues." And again, the reason why they were sending me back home was because I never told them I was being abused.
Hmm.
So they sent me back home, and then I was a runaway again. And that's when I ran into my son's father, and then everything was kind of cool, and I wound up living with him in his house with his family, with his mother and everybody. And then he started beating me. So yeah.
Was the refusal to report the abuse, was that in some ways protecting your mother, you believe?
No, it was, I was psychologically conditioned to think it was my fault.
That happens.
So that's why I never said, hey, my mom is abusing me. I didn't know I was abused until I got that first apartment. And by this time, I was in my 20s. And one day I was laying in the bed and everything started coming back to me. It was like I blocked it for a minute. And I started remembering and remembering and remembering and remembering from when it first started, and all the craziness and being tied up and being chained up and being stripped naked and beat and being having my head split open. Like I started remembering, and I just started like weeping in my bed while my son was asleep, and I was trying not to let him hear me cry. You know, I had one bedroom, so I gave him the bedroom and I slept in the living room, and I was in there weeping because I finally came to the realization, like, I was abused. So for years I was walking around not putting a label on it.
Right. Right. It's a powerful story. Powerful story.